Hi, I'm William Malik, and I'm here to give you today's bit of security for January 30th, 2024. So, the question is, how do you prove that you are who you say you are when you're talking to a computer? That's right, we're talking about identification and authentication. They're usually lumped together. Identification is asserting that you are someone, and the tools for identification are basically come down to biometrics. Authentication, which is how do you prove that, is a more subtle and complex thing. Now, there's a saying which is you have to have something you know, something you have, or something you are to prove you are who you say you are. But in fact, that kind of breaks down because the something you are is really just an assertion of your existence. And it's not something that you really have much control over, and it gets compromised. You really can't correct it. And that's becoming a significant problem because it now turns out that with good, 4K video, you can actually get a repeatable iris scan off of somebody. With generative AI, you can build something that sounds an awful lot like a person's voice, resembles their likeness. So biometric authentication really isn't that much of a technique. So it comes down to something you know or something you have. But what's the thing you have? Well, the thing you have is going to be a token or a device that provides an answer to a question, participates in some kind of a key exchange, something like that. The problem with something you know, a password, is that we were taught wrong on how to construct passwords early. The password complexity rules were actually thought up very, very early in the 90s without much deep thought into what actually makes a good password. And so we ended up with these ridiculous complexity rules like letters and numbers, have to have a special character, all of that nonsense. Well, it turns out that the best password is just a long password. If you want a good password, and there are situations where you have to rely on them, just look around the room, find a favorite book, and pick out a password like, "My name is Sam, I like green eggs and ham." Okay, now don't use that one because I just did and everybody knows it. But that kind of a password has 26 characters, which gets you something like 6 times 10 to the 26th power variations, like trillions of years to crack that password through guesswork. And even if they see a bunch of books by Dr. Seuss on your shelves, how would they know which one, which slogan? So just use a long password if you have to use a password. If not, you can use a device. Now, SIM swapping means that phones are vulnerable. I gave a talk a little while ago on how to avoid that. A man-in-the-middle attack makes it fairly easy to swipe credentials. Right now, the strongest thing you can have is going to be some sort of a pass key. And at the top end of that, we have pass keys that use essentially a public key encryption algorithm. Those are the strongest. If you have to use a password, use a long one. If you're going to use a device, use a pass key that uses some kind of public key infrastructure. Now, even there, we're not out of the woods. Public key infrastructure relies on a thing called a public key crypto system. And that's a mathematical problem that is fairly easy to calculate, but very difficult to reverse engineer. Multiplying two large primes gives you a large number that can be used as a public key. If somebody gives you a large number and asks you to find the prime factors of that number, that's going to take you a really, really long time, unless you have a quantum computer. And the rate at which quantum computers are getting better, that means we probably have about 4 or 5 years before we're going to have to roll the infrastructure. But until then, public key crypto systems, passkeys, those are the strongest we've got. If you have to use a password, use a long one. Stay safe out there. That's your bit of security. I'm William Malik. Thanks.